Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Energy and Utility Skills on meeting your workforce talent needs in a post-Brexit Britain. With me is my Chief Exec, Nick Ellins.
Hello, good morning.
So today's agenda is over the next 30 minutes is to provide you with a quick update on the state of the UK labour market, and then we'll say a few words on the likely implications of Brexit and the labour market and future immigration policy in terms of the availability of skilled and unskilled workers in the UK moving forward. Explain how employers can help mitigate some of those negative impacts that we might reasonably expect. So, first of all, Chief Executive of Energy and Utility Skills Group, Nick Ellins, is just going to say a few introductory words.
Thank you very much, Rob, and welcome to the webinar. We have a very mixed group on this live version now, but also this will be used after today's call and stay on our website to bring other people in. So we have a mixture of organisations from the supply chain through to the regulated utilities, gas, power, water and waste. We have recruitment companies. We have a number of people from the recycling renewables sector. And so we'll try and keep this as broad as we can, but it's primarily focused around the gas, power, water and waste utility sector. So we'll do our best to involve everyone. The key really for the reason with the workforce planning webinar today is because it's become so integral to everyone's business processes. And it is now a core business process to align the changing organisation needs with its people strategy. Now, for some organisations, that's already a very structured process. And for some, it's a very daunting task. And when we don't feel it needs to be that way. One of our key drivers for moving this forward is to give the members of Energy and Utility Skills and the organisations that work with them help to get the HR subject, the people subject, into the boardroom. And to do that, the dialogue needs to be about evidence. It needs to be about human capital. It needs to be about workforce resilience, about retaining corporate memory, about workforce safety. What we tend to find is that when we refer to the word skills, even though it's embedded in our company name, it can sometimes be a little bit too intangible to get into the boardroom. Workforce planning allows you to have the evidence to do that. So in the regulatory environment of the utilities industry, Ofgem and Ofwat agree. For Ofwat, the price settlement for England and Wales actually requires companies to think for workforce resilience. And in the Ofgem RIIO2 settlement for gas and power, the draft methodology is already looking and expecting companies to have their own workforce strategies with workforce planning and the evidence to put in robust business plans where they wish to make the investment in people. Importantly, for many of the big utilities is the investors agree. And there's an organisation, I think called the Workforce Disclosure Initiative, that now has over 120 institutional investors representing around £9 trillion of funds under management. And they see that human capital is a major issue, that they need to understand the risk to their business, because without the people doing the delivery, the business can't deliver, and clearly they're investing to see businesses that outperform. So one of the things they wanted to do as institutional investors is they want to see demonstrated proof of company strategies on workforce renewal. For the unions around the major important partners for the utility sector, this is highly important. The huge change that's going on in terms of the environment around businesses at the moment means that people's careers need transitions. And whilst many jobs would almost require a clean out of the old and a bringing of the new, most businesses would never go that way and want to transition their existing workforce into the new skills that are required. And that for the unions is a major piece that they wish to see people understand with evidence what they are required to do, and then they wish to be part of helping that move forward. For the health and safety executive and for the quality regulators, environmental and drinking water quality regulators, for them, they look at the same thing, but they expect that understanding of workforce to be there for core competence and compliance. Many of those issues around basic public health issues and the health and safety of the workforce. And so it's critical for them that companies have the right people in the right jobs with the right skills. For businesses generally as well, of course, the one that most people would put at the top of their list, aside maybe from health and safety, is to be customer focused. And you as businesses need to know what talent you're fighting for. You need to serve your customers' future and current needs, some often difficult thing to blend. And you're expected to go and fight for the people you need against a highly competitive environment that Rob will tell you about. And you are fighting. The feedback we have is you're fighting. In Southern Ireland, for example, the smart metering program has currently got 250,000 smart meters that need to be fitted. And often the talent is being drawn from Northern Ireland and from Scotland. The Scottish Government have just released their Fair Work strategy, or are releasing their Fair Work strategy, and really primarily on migration grounds are looking to England. In Northern Ireland and Wales, they're looking at both. They're looking at England and Scotland and the talent that's generated there as a very strong source of talent to bring across to their organisations. British Telecom have got the largest recruitment campaign in their history to bring in broadband as fast as they can to enable the economy. So 36,500 people are needed, many of which are the core roles for many of the people on this webinar. In the water industry, massive commitments to leakage, all requiring manual technicians, huge commitments to metering from 2020. Originally, when we were talking metering for water, it was going to kick off about the time the smart metering achievements would be hit in the energy market. That now no longer looks like those two things will coincide. So both markets will need metering technicians, smart metering technicians at exactly the same time, one working inside the house, one working outside the house. We also know from the asset owners on the call's point of view that the application volumes for jobs are very good. You can put an advert in a paper and get a couple of thousand responses, but the quality is not what you need. The quality is low. For the supply chain who are serving those organisations and trying to be the best partners they can be, they need talent, they need numbers, and they're not seeing the quantity. That's also affected then also by migration policy, which Rob will talk you through. And finally, I wanted to mention diversity and inclusion, because in the 2 years that we've been talking about this with seriousness, we've been doing the inclusion piece for some time, but diversity and inclusion is now atop so many boards' agendas for their own boards, but for their own businesses, and people want to represent the communities they serve. So they want to bring in new thinking, new skills. They want to meet new consumer demands, and to do that, they've got to bring people in from across the spectrum of their communities. So that is another major piece in understanding what your workforce is, where you want to take it to, and how you're going to get it there, both on diversity and inclusion grounds, but of course in terms of the competencies too. So our aim today, as Rob said, is to take you through what we see as those issues, and at the end we'll take any questions you want to put to us, and we can of course pick up after the webinar. So without any further ado, I'll hand you back to Rob.
Thank you, Nick. So we'll jump straight in with an update on the UK labour market as it stands on the latest data. I should say that on your screen, hopefully you will see a chat box where you are able to type questions as we go through over the next 20 minutes. So feel free to type your questions in, and Nick and I will pick them up towards the end. So the challenges facing the UK energy, utilities, infrastructure sector are quite broad and wide ranging. We have a very tough labour market at the moment. It's very tight. We have a growing and changing population. The trends in immigration and emigration of non-UK nationals is obviously an important part of this webinar that we'll pick up specifically. Competition for talent is still extremely tight, with lots of activities going on, both within the sector, energy and utilities, but also wider infrastructure and telecommunications. And the supply of talent is struggling to meet current demand. So we'll cover those points in a bit more detail now. So we have the tightest labour market basically since records began about 40 years ago. We have the highest rate of employment. 76% of 16 to 64-year-olds are in employment. 80% of men, 72% of women, which now stands at 32.7 million people, nearly 500,000 more than just a year ago. We have low unemployment. The unemployment rate at the moment is just 3.9%, although youth unemployment still remains stubbornly high at about 11.5%. So that's about 1.3 million people unemployed, which is just over 200,000, fewer people than a year ago. So we've got record employment, record low unemployment, and the ability of the UK labour market to grow by itself by getting more people out of economic inactivity is very limited as well, because just 20% of 16 to 64-year-olds are economically inactive. A good proportion of those are students, and we have in there retirements, long-term illness as well. So what the statistics show at the moment is that the number of people who are retired at the moment is just over 400,000 fewer than it was in 2010. So the data supports the anecdotal evidence that people are working longer. The state retirement age going up has enforced that. But also there are economic factors for the individuals concerned. Average life expectancy now is getting well into the 80s, so people are feeling the economic necessity to work longer. So that's an opportunity to retain that talent within organisations, but also presents a challenge potentially in that it's limiting new opportunities that are opening up. So managing that transition from and the knowledge transfer from older workers to new talent will be crucial. Across the whole of the UK economy at the end of 2018, average salaries, weekly earnings rose by 3.5%. They were highest in the West Midlands, where it went up by 4.2%, lowest in the North East at just 0.5%. And some of the industries that have seen particular growth are around civil engineering, and so that wider infrastructure construction area. The water industry are seeing significant wage increases. Electricity is about industry average, so is water. In gas, the data is not coming through quite as strong yet in terms of salary increases. Although interestingly, in the last employer skills survey, which was conducted in 2017, skill shortages in the gas distribution industry were twice the national average. It's about 44% of all vacancies being classified as skill shortages. But for whatever reason, that hasn't yet fed through into salary increases. It's also interesting that the largest salary increases have come through at the lower end of the skills levels. So elementary occupations, the low skilled workers and operatives have seen slightly higher wage increases than the more technical engineering roles. We have a population that is both growing and changing. By 2040, there'll be an additional 6 million people living in the UK, according to Office for National Statistics. But the proportion of under 16-year-olds will stay the same at about 1 in 5 people. But the proportion of the population that are 65 and older is forecast to increase slightly by about 3 percentage points. But that doesn't necessarily lead to more people being retired through the data that we've gone over. People are working longer. The number of people who are retired is reducing. There's also changing demographics, and particularly around the ethnicity profile of the population. Currently, around 12% of the 16 plus population are from a BAME background, but that varies substantially by age group. The younger age bands are far more likely to have a diverse ethnicity profile than the 50 pluses, for example. And that is showed on the chart you can see on your screen. It particularly affects London, where now BAME in the 16 to 19 age band is actually the majority now. So when companies are looking at their D&I ambitions, as well as benchmarking against industry averages and against your peers, you really should bear in mind your local, regional, or even sub-regional ethnicity profiles, because that is the community in which you serve, and that is probably the labour market where you will focus most of your recruitment activities. So those should be areas to benchmark. Investment in national infrastructure continues to increase. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority produce a construction and infrastructure pipeline, which is a database of all the projects which have a value of greater than £50 million. And in that, energy, utilities and transport infrastructure dominate. Around 75% of the round about £600 billion in the pipeline is within energy, utilities and transport. And looking further ahead from 2020, 2021, the share within energy particularly increases still further. But in the short term, it's round about a third, a quarter to a third of that infrastructure programme is in the energy and utilities sector or in its immediately adjacent sectors. So as Nick alluded to a few minutes ago, a lot of the projects within the infrastructure pipeline will require very similar skills, if not the same skills as energy and utility sector, or at least the same base technical knowledge and understanding. So we anticipate that competition for talent will continue to be as strong as it is now for some years to come. And on that competition for talent, around about 22% of all vacancies in the UK economy are classified as skill shortages. That means that companies are having difficulty getting quality applicants, either through a lack of skills, a lack of qualifications, or a lack of experience. In the energy and utility sector, that's 33%. And I mentioned earlier that within gas distribution, it's even higher than that, it's about 44%. Water comes in slightly lower, to about 20%. So there are industry variations. But the Engineering UK, in their latest State of the Nation report, Engineering UK 2018, report that 61% of businesses are not confident that they will have enough people applying for their higher level skills over the coming years. So it looks like skill shortages are beginning to bite. We've seen some evidence of that in the salary trends. The demand for labour is strong, not just within the energy and utilities sector, but also in the demand within the energy and utility sector as a whole, but in the separate industries is just one part of the picture, and in some areas the demand is dwarfed by what's going on in construction and what's called specialised construction, which is essentially the larger civil programmes around transport and energy generation infrastructure. So we, as I said, we do anticipate that demand and the competition for talent will be strong across a range of industries, which will require that very similar base talent. And there are few signs that the labour market is going to ease anytime soon. The number of vacancies in the economy went up by nearly 40,000 over the past year. Within electricity and gas and water and sewerage, vacancies stayed at about the same level. But across the UK's economy as a whole, vacancies are still growing. And we have the lowest recorded ratio of unemployed people per vacancy that the UK has seen since records began in 2001. There are just 1.6 unemployed people per vacancy. And some additional analysis that we've done on this supports the anecdotal evidence that the labour market around good technician, engineering and operatives is pretty much at full employment. So when you're recruiting, you're not going to particularly get them from the unemployed stock. It will be attracting them from other sectors of the economy and from other employers. There is a shortage of talent coming into the market. Engineering UK suggests that there's a shortfall of about 59,000 graduates and technicians per year. But they also report some interesting findings. There are too few STEM teachers. There are too many STEM initiatives with little coordination. I think they report over 600 separate STEM initiatives across the UK. Too few women becoming engineers, that we've heard before. Companies are bringing through too few homegrown talent, and there is potentially a lack of understanding of the value and the range of apprenticeships, and within the young people population, still that issue around seeing it as a credible alternative to university education. Okay. So in terms of non-UK population trends, as the chart there shows, the flow of EU nationals coming into the UK has really dropped off since the referendum. There are now 61,000 fewer EU nationals working in the UK than there were a year ago. But there has been growth in non-EU nationals coming to the UK, and there are now 130,000 more non-EU nationals working in the UK. So the net migration figure for the EU of plus 57,000, so they're still adding to the population, but that is the lowest figure recorded since 2009. So now the career aspirations of those non-EU nationals versus EU nationals is something that we'll be monitoring closely. The growth of non-EU nationals is through people with definite job offers. But of course, with the freedom of movement of EU nationals, that wasn't a requirement. So non-EU nationals are seeing opportunities in the UK, but they must still at this point have a job offer. So generally speaking, that those trends on EU nationals, we think will particularly affect the lower skills areas around operatives and craftspersons, particularly in the contractor community and within waste management and recycling. So moving on to likely future immigration, the first sentence of this slide has been updated frequently over the past few weeks. Judging by last night's activities, we are now due to leave the European Union on October the 31st. It may be sooner, it may be later, and perhaps the fact that we're leaving on Halloween shows that the 27 leaders do have a sense of humour and are bringing that to bear on this. But so although there's uncertainty around the actual process of the UK leaving the European Union and some uncertainties around the timescales and some of the nature of the final deal that is or may not be agreed on that, we do know a reasonable amount of what the immigration policy is likely to look like, in that the government have said that EU nationals will not have any particular benefits over and above non-EU nationals. So what we're expecting is that the current process of recruiting non-EU nationals through the Tier 2 process will remain largely in place. Now there are issues to be finalised there, particularly around some of the thresholds, around perhaps around salary and the skill threshold, and how that might affect certain industries. Although I don't think energy utilities are expecting any particular sector deals there. There are some of the finer points to be agreed, but that won't apply to Irish nationals and those from Crown dependent agencies. They will have much lower hurdles. And we think that there is also the resident labour market test. I think will go as well, so there won't be a requirement to advertise in the UK for 4 weeks before you recruit those non-UK nationals. But as we've seen, that there is a very strong trend out of the UK for EU nationals. I think there's a strong sense of them generally feeling unwelcome and being unsettled by that uncertainty. But there's also pull factors from the European Union countries as well, where some of the home nations, particularly the EU8, the Central and Eastern European countries, their economies are gaining stronger. The value of the pound has been diminished somewhat, meaning that the earnings sent over there is not as attractive opposition as it was. But the extent to which these policies will impact upon individual businesses will vary greatly. There will be some direct impacts on some employees, perhaps particularly around contractors, waste management and recycling, but others will feel those indirects less so. But some research by IPPR suggests that around 95% of EU nationals working in the North East and 90% in the East Midlands wouldn't meet the proposed eligibility rules that have been put forward by the MAC once we get to a post-Brexit market. And even in London, the figure was 60%. So the salary threshold and the skills threshold is something that companies really need to get a handle of. But there will be direct and indirect challenges. But as Nick said as well, these challenges actually, when you look at them in the round, they present the perfect opportunity to take stock of your workforce as it is at the moment, and to look at how you measure the dynamics of your workforce, and all the other factors which will have pull impact on that workforce. So as well as looking at D&I and decarbonisation, the impact of digitisation, plus the requirements of what an Ofgem for price control reporting, and then for 10 years beyond, which I believe is the requirement. Add in Brexit into the mix here, and it is the perfect opportunity to take stock of what you have at the moment, what are the push and pull factors on that market, and to really get some metrics so you can measure those impacts over the coming years. So in terms of your workforce as it stands at the moment, how many EU nationals do you employ? In what roles? How many? Have you engaged with them? What are their plans? I know some companies are doing that, and there are ways to encourage them and support them through the legal processes, if their ambition is to stay within the UK. And of course, you also want to look at how Brexit might impact upon your supply of skills, particularly those in areas which are at the lower end of the skills ranges. But also equally, it might affect the flow of students into the UK, and therefore going into some of the higher end engineering and technician roles. But undoubtedly, there will be indirect impact on the workforce. So you should really need to get the handle on how they might affect your workforce moving forward over the years. So monitoring staff turnover, average job tenure, average time to hire will all give you an indication of whether the market within particular job roles is getting tighter over the years, or whether it's getting any easier or any worse to recruit. And of course, all those will be over and above the metrics that you should be looking at as a business anyway, particularly around when do people actually retire. Now people can go as and when they please, basically. I know companies are having trouble workforce planning because of that added uncertainty. Obviously, D&I aspects around gender, ethnicity and disability. Don't forget benchmarking ethnicity against your regional and local labour markets will give you more of an idea than against industry averages. And also looking at the extent to which you rely on the labour market to recruit the talent that you need. So monitoring that ratio between internal and external candidates will be crucial. Okay. That leads us through into how you look at your resourcing strategies. Nick mentioned that the emphasis, the additional emphasis now on upskilling and creating progression pathways, and how many companies are seeing that as a means of getting the talent they need. Maximising that knowledge transfer between older workers, that they are with you for longer now, but it also means you have to manage their transition. I know some companies are looking at flexible retirement arrangements, and so managing that knowledge transfer through to the new talent coming into the business. And of course, there's obviously apprenticeship frameworks and standards, and the levy as it applies to you within your national frameworks, which is obviously different in England as it is to the devolved administrations. But there are still opportunities there to engage with government and to bring some of your analysis and some of your issues to bear on that discussion. Now, in my opinion, it isn't good enough just to look at this within your business as a whole. You really need to drill down into functional areas and into job roles and job families, because it will affect your workforce differently in different areas of business, in different geographies, for different skills and job roles. So looking at job families and job groupings will be crucial for you, I think, as businesses moving forward. Okay, so that is a very quick whistle-stop tour of the UK labour market as it stands and what we understand to be some of the implications of Brexit and future immigration policy with the UK. Nick, over to you for any final thoughts?
So we'll be carrying on with this topic for quite some time now as we start looking at the different variables that the UK is going through in a post-European environment. A number of the utility companies are going to be moving into strategic planning as a requirement of their regulated world, but mostly because they see it as the right thing to do to get the maximum efficiency and best results for their customers. So we'll be doing a lot of work on that. For the contractor supply chain market, please stay close to us on this, because we know you're vulnerable to lots of these areas, and I'd also apply that to the waste market. We're very aware of the issues. We have a significant talent pool we're working on here, a thing called Talent Source Network, and it's doing two things. One is to bring lots of new talent into the sector, but the second thing is to deploy talent that's actually where companies do have to make structural changes. We want to make sure this sector doesn't lose them. We're working very hard to manage also the introduction of artificial intelligence and making sure that's sustainable in the workforce. We're also, as I mentioned, working closely with the investors, because they're looking to see that the human capital in this sector is not only protected, but is enhanced. So there's lots more to come on this subject, and Rob's also got a number of publications and things we can do for you if you're interested in actually having workforce planning done, that we can pick up for you and talk you through that. It doesn't have to be a complex and difficult process, and it's very simple and easy to do, to put you in the driving seat, so you've got that core business process information to understand how to get your people strategy to deliver your business objectives. Thank you very much indeed for your time.